with super creative lines, but I've never had any huge questions for GivePLZ that I can recall, and just seems like a very good all-rounder.
Yeah, indeed. And to get things going out the gate here, another Rush Warrior mirror. We're seeing, you know, a deck that wasn't necessarily super high up in terms of bring rate. I believe that Rush Warrior was the 3rd highest overall brought archetype after Control Priest and Miracle Rogue. But we're seeing a lot here in the top 8. So clearly the players who brought it have been doing well, even though I've been somewhat underwhelmed, I will admit, so far this weekend by the Rush Warrior. But after a full mull by GivePLZ, we have to think for Surrender, are any of these cards individually strong enough to not full mull for Gnog?
That's a good question. If anything, Rakara feels like one of those options, but it feels only strong if you're able to stick a 2-drop leading into her, right? Because Rakara, a lot of the time your opponent will not even have played anything for her to rush into if you're the one on the play, right? Because even if they go Gannarg turn 1, your turn 3 is the turn right before their Gannarg wakes up. And so I'd be inclined to throw all of it, but I wouldn't hate keeping Rakara.
Well, although it's a Gannarg-less game at the moment, respectable hands, I would argue, for both players already, with GivePLZ having just strong tempo options, Parade Leader into Bumper Car looking like, if nothing else, a good start to the game. But Surrender, despite having a slower hand, of course, with Watley to draw cards and Playmaker, to give some stronger combos, it's a mid-game hand that can definitely swing things back, even if he loses that early game.
And he's just discovered an additional Samuro. That card is so strong in the matchup. If it gets to the point where both players have conditionings and it just becomes a trade war, Samuro is the ace in the hole that allows you only one card to sweep up nearly an entire board. Still dependent on him getting buffs onto it, of course, but he's likely to thin his deck towards conditionings with the Watley playable on turn 5. My only concern for Surrender really is falling too far behind in the early game, and he does have the Wormhole Challenger to prevent the worst of disasters.
Yeah, I think even if it just triple trades into the Parade Leader, you are fine with that. As Parade Leader now presented to himself, again, this kind of feeds into what his game plan is going to be in this matchup. He could obviously just tempo it out, but you're kind of expecting a 2-drop rush here. Maybe it's better to save it for Samuro for a turn 5 bigger AoE.
Yeah, I do think I would be inclined towards that as well, even if it somewhat conflicts with the Watley. Just the fact that GivePLZ coined Parade Leader, you can have a very strong read on Bumper Car, so I don't like Surrender feeding his own Parade Leader into that. And even if GivePLZ will have a 3-3 unchallenged on the board, as long as Surrender can take not too much damage leading into Watley, he'll have a very good clear with the Samuro and Parade Leader minimum, and it only gets better from there.
Well, I'm thinking you got to follow the curve here as GivePLZ. You get some amount of value, even if this doesn't like win him board, because there are plenty of ways for Surrender to swing this back. I think it's definitely going to be getting him a lot of chip damage at the start, which is worth a fair amount, admittedly, in the matchup. That conditioning, though, is the card that unlocks this mid-game slow strategy from Surrender completely. You're probably not going for it quite yet, of course, because you want to wait until it reaches rank 2, but the power plays are going to be coming thick and fast when they do come down.
Right. Honestly, for Surrender, all he needs to do is not fall into the trap of the Giga Greed, which I feel maybe High 3 did fall a little bit prey to yesterday. Which is when you have access to these big combos of Playmaker and Parade Leader and Conditioning and Watley, right? You can be very easily tempted to wait until Watley to get the most conditioning buffs, but there are worlds where your opponent can pressure you out there. It's a bit harder because Surrender does have Parade Leader as a panic button, but if GivePLZ hits his own conditioning, it's not guaranteed that Blademaster on its own clears everything.
Oh, this is a really weird one. You do want to corrupt that stage dive, but every single one of the cards that you can play in your hand, you want to save for another turn. You could go for Playmaker and then draw, but you're just because I'm thinking there's not all too much synergy in the hand at the moment with Playmaker, but after you draw the guaranteed Bumper Car off of Watley, there will be a lot of synergy with the Playmaker.
I think it's fine to use the Playmaker though, because it's either Playmaker or Conditioning you save, right? And Conditioning feels better to save because it goes to rank 2 next turn. I think if he holds on to both of these, you're not able to play them both on the same turn and clear, right? And he definitely needs to think about clearing in the near future because he's taking yet another slow turn. So I like the Parade Leader just to get the Stage Dive minion in hand, and then he can go Condition next turn. And if it's too much pressure on the other side, still get the Samuro with 3 attack.
This is, of course, the other option, the forbidden play in Rush Warrior of uncorrupted stage dive. It's surprisingly rare that you ever see this played in Rush Warrior, but it just shows exactly what Surrender's game plan is. He does not have to swing back board by tempoing out minions. He's building up, biding his time for that one ultra swing turn that will pull him back in the game. But these next couple of turns are absolutely crucial. What is the line between too greedy and not greedy enough in terms of swinging this one back?
I have to say, I mean, obviously Watley gets him the biggest conditionings ever, but the thing is, Watley is slow this turn and double conditioning is slow next turn. I don't think he can afford to do both of those things. If it's Watley this turn, then he has to settle on a single conditioning and clear turn, which is still pretty good because he gets to play Blade Master Samuro after that. But I'm leaning towards at least one conditioning this turn, and then and Samuro feels like an overcommitment into this board, but he does have like another Samuro in the deck.
Oh, Surrender is ultra greeding this. He is, of course, guaranteed the triple card draw here and sets up for some monstrous swing turns. And the question now, as he is undeniably going to be winning the late game, is this quick enough? Is he going to be taking too much damage before GivePLZ can close this one out?
That was the fear, but it happens that GivePLZ doesn't get to develop any minions with that much health on them, so the Samuro is able to clear everything here, if not the bumper car turn. And yeah, Samuro feels mana inefficient, right, because he definitely wants to commit one conditioning here, so we could see conditioning, Parade Leader, bumper car, or conditioning, Playmaker, bumper car, but then hand space becomes an issue. Hold on. Conditioning.
Yeah, it's awkward.
Actually, even just conditioning and the pirate is not bad here. He can still clear off the 3/3, put a big taunt in the way, and he can get very greedy here because he has that taunt.
That's true. That is true. Again, it's a greedy line, I suppose you could say, but there's not all too much that can effectively deal with such a large Sword Eater.
It can get immediately traded down if there's something like a Tent Trasher on the other side because he has seen a conditioning, so that's a worry. Honestly, Surrender just doesn't want to take any more damage than he has to here because for sure all these resources wins him the late game. With double conditioning into Crab Rider, I think is a clear on everything but the 1/6. Okay, but he ends up on this line. It's a bit risky, but it happens that GivePLZ's hand is very low pressure until turn 8.
It is. That Samuro is 3 attack at this point, I believe, so it will be able to, in addition to either the Warm Wall or one of the rushes, be able to cleanly deal with it. But instead, thanks to the run attack, he can save that Samuro for an extra turn, which is pretty crucial, to be honest, to deal with whatever big build-up Surrender has to be leading towards. Because, I mean, GivePLZ knows if Surrender doesn't develop something this turn, he's just dead anyway.
Holding on to Samuro is so key in the matchup, especially since for GivePLZ, this is the natural one in the deck. Again, Surrender has one more in his own deck because the first one was discovered, but he absolutely has to pull the trigger on removal now. Cannot afford to take any more face damage because the Gunarg is waking up next turn. Troublemaker available in 2 more turns. And there's many ways to clear this up. Conditioning with just bumper cars and Crab Rider does it alone, even without factoring in the Playmaker.
You aren't even ready.
Oy, oy, oy. This is just like one turn lethal on board setup, I think, is what Surrender has done nearly.
It's absolutely absurd the amounts of pressure he gets.
Here for a good time.
Avoids overdrawing by only playing 1 bumper car at a time. It's not a full clear.
And those extra points of damage he takes do start to add up. Obviously, with the hero power, he can start to get out of range, but you have to be always aware of the threat of just weapon-swinging face closing out the game.
The conditioning is quite clutch for Surrender, or at least the second one, because the Samuro cannot actually kill the full board on its own. GivePLZ can swing into the Playmaker, and he kind of has... Okay, sorry, he still has this token. Yeah, that's fine. Even if he misses the armor up, he is fully on the face game plan now. He has Troublemaker to follow up. He knows he's lost on the value game, but that's where that entire early game greediness from Surrender might come back to bite him, but he can put a lot of things in the way of Troublemaker.
I mean, he can just straight up threaten lethal next turn. Alex Straza will pale in comparison to the amount of damage that just straight up ETC will be able to do, because on this turn I'm looking at like just at first glance Parade Leader Samuro and Crab Rider or Bumper Car as well. It of course does not have to be the Samuro, but I think at this point he can just play it because of the sheer amount of damage that it gives him on the board.
Feels like the Crab Rider accomplishes the same thing for a bit cheaper, front-loading a bit more damage. So it's not setting up ETC lethal, it's just setting up lethal on board. GivePLZ knows there's only one play. He needs one of these 3-3s to take down a 7-3, I believe.
Or he needs one of them to go face, because then he could get Alex Straza for lethal off the top, even with the hero power that is available. But now for Surrender, we are looking at quite a lot of damage on this turn. Not quite 20, 24, 26?
Not lethal. All he wants to
28?
do is fit... He... 28. Yeah, I think it's somewhere around that realm. But if he can't get lethal this turn, he really wants to fit in either hero power or Alex's own face, because he's playing around his own, GivePLZ's own Alex Straza out.
Right, yeah,
and he can absolutely clear the board while doing that. He can set up a taunt as well. And just because of the size of his minions, the sheer power, and the fact that there's ETC, almost no matter what board he develops, he threatens the counter lethal anyway. So he's fit in the hero power now, and even if we do have to see like Bumper Car and some tokens into the Troublemaker, it's absolutely fine.
It is absolutely fine. As you say, he is never, ever, ever losing this board for the rest of this game. So all he needs to do is make sure he's not dying to Alex Straza, not dying to the Playmaker, to the Troublemaker, and setting up lethal as quick as possible, as this does achieve all the damage going face. Lethal happily represented on the following turn, and it looks like GivePLZ's aggro start here. His aggressive game plan has finally met its end, as the sheer value, the mid-game sweep plan from Surrender is coming up trumps. What a game, and what a demonstration, a showcase of the two ways that you can play Warrior. And if you bide your time, don't let yourself get flustered. Very often the greedier route from Surrender is just the better game plan.
When you do have access to double conditioning and Wattly, you have all the tools you need to win in the late game. I will say it was still a bit risky, because GivePLZ did have a very slow turn, right? It was the turn 5. If he had Tent Trasher as opposed to like the tokens he ended up playing, I think Surrender could have been in quite a bit of trouble there. But Surrender just navigating and knowing that his health total was safe on the exact turns that he was playing around, especially after having seen the tokens. That means he didn't have to play around some ETC outs. All he had to play around is some Alex off the top on turn 9 for GivePLZ. And it worked out perfectly. When you have all of those buffs, it's just such an easy matter to set up the counter lethal, even in the face of a Troublemaker.
Love to see it from Surrender, and the Warrior getting a win is a big deal. I do think the Warrior could potentially struggle as the series goes on. We have Rogue left over for Surrender, which I think is the good matchup. That's where Warrior is very much hoping to get the win. But the Paladin, the Libram Paladin left over Surrender, that could be a little bit more of a tough one for the Warrior. These big taunts, there's a high amount of healing, can be very difficult for the Warrior to keep up with. But first of all, it is going to be GivePLZ once again lining up that Warrior, and Surrender going with his Miracle Rogue. One of the decks that I think has been the most delightful to watch him pilot. I think he just sees, almost like Neo in the Matrix, the lines, the code behind the deck that none of us else can see, because he just takes such consistently creative lines that are so cool to see.
Just a while ago, Alutamu playing the Wicked Stab on his own Octobot to set up for a field contactor, and Surrender was the pioneer of that play in APAC in week 2. I think it's been very, very long since that happened, and it still holds up. It is just high awareness of how the deck's power spikes actually function, what you're allowed to give up in order to get that unlimited card draw nearly from the field contact and hit your power plays. We already saw a super creative rogue line from Alan just a while ago, getting down turn 3 Jandis. I'm sure Surrender can show us something similar, if not even flashier. However, this is still an unfavorable matchup.
Still an unfavorable matchup, absolutely. I think that Surrender will know absolutely what you are looking for. Primarily, well, we talk about the burn plan. Getting on board, first of all, is the first step to getting to the burn plan. But Surrender has shown very, very cool ways of using the Kazakus Golem. You know, we've seen the classic 10-mana Golem being something that Surrender will often look towards to try and find like stealth, spell damage, copy it for a bit of extra push later on. But before we mess around with anything like that, we can just see, first of all, he's got himself one of those premium board control hands in the form of Octobot and Mankrik for a lot of early development.
Oh yes, and while there is turn 1 Gunarg for Give Please, Surrender can still be relatively certain that his Octobot will not get rushed into by something like Tent Trasher because he's on the coin himself, right? It's a bit harder for Give Please to activate unless he has Bumper Car on curve.
Yeah, for Surrender, like if he goes for Coin Octobot, at the very least, he has Foxy Fraud and then Prize Plunderer to proc his own Octobot. It's not what you want to do because Prize Plunderer is a premium card in the matchup to deal with these very minion-dense hands that Warrior almost always has access to. But it does just give him consistency in his ability to proc the Octobot, which is also premium in the matchup.
Bit awkward because you can just hold on to the coin as well for a bit more flexibility later on, because say this Octobot proc does go off after the Mankrik, your curve is a little bit topped out by then. But I think Surrender is respecting the possibility of there to be like Parade Leader or Bumper Car coming out this turn, and if he had not pre-developed the Octobot, then Give Please in response could play a Rush minion to immediately kill the Octobot turn 3. So Surrender just getting it down when it is safest to go off, and it denies Give Please just going for something like Bumper Car this turn.
Ooh, that is a spicy top deck, though, not even having to use the Prize Plunderer on his own Octobot should he wish to proc it. That, of course, means that he couldn't play the Foxy Fraud in addition to that. But even then, I think if you are going to be proccing the Octobot at all, which is not a necessity, of course, it has to come in the form of Orc Merchant.
So many options.
I agree if he is proccing it, but it's really a question of is it necessary? Because turn 3 from Give Please, you've seen 0 athletic studies. 10 trash are going to cost 4 next turn. So it's not actually killable from Give Please as far as I can tell from hand with nothing developed. So I think it's fine to greed the Octobot a little bit later, and it'll guaranteed get a proc because of the Gunarg waking up.
I challenge you.
Kind of funny. I mean, obviously it doesn't proc it 4 times, but it's still just kind of a weird way to go for the Octobot proc here.
And Surrender's hand would cost -50 or something.
Yeah. Oh, man.
As it happens, it's not the greatest hand in the world to discount. The value tops out at Mankrik without field contact. This is still waiting for a secret passage or like Kazakus even to get something impactful to do. He can very thoroughly win board right now though, which I'm honestly quite interested in.
Yeah, like literally just playing every minion in his hand sounds quite strong to me. You can, I believe, clear the board then, right? If you go for a Dagger Swing and Orc Merchant into the 2/2 and then both the Prize Plunderers into the Warmaul Challenger, yes, you are then leaving yourself pretty supremely vulnerable to even just an unbuffed Samuro would just clear the board at that point. But if they don't have it, that's a lot of damage that you can push.
It's a lot. It punishes a field contact off the top, but in a world where Surrender's looking for specifically field contact to go with this hand, I think the odds of him picking up Kazakus or either Secret Passage is just higher, which you would be kind of happy if you went for the all-in game plan.
Care to make a wager?
And if he is going for the line you said, I think it's better to Prize Plunderer a 2/2 and then the 1/6 and just hit with your dagger. Oh, okay, just gonna save the other prize plunderer then. To be
Sure.
fair, it's a very low pressure minion he's saving up, so in case there's field contact, he doesn't have 0 things to proc it with.
I think we've got to be looking at Sword Eater on this turn. Rakari is obviously nice with a minion that's stuck in play, but swing into Sword Eater, real clean.
Yeah, it is dead on board to the 2 minions, but it at least softens the Mancrick and gets the Divine Shield off the Foxy Fraud, and then GivePLZ can go for these. I was going to say run thack, but there's only 1 minion in hand.
That's true. Yeah, probably going to be setting up with a conditioning first, you'd have to imagine, after the stage dive comes down. But Surrender getting close to the worst draw in his deck, as it is just literally unplayable for the vast majority, if not all of this game. He really needs a miracle now to get himself some extra card draw.
And if you are holding out for the miracle, that means not playing Prize Plunder this turn, which is very awkward, right? Because this Wicked Stab is still just rank 1. And he really wants to take down the Sword Eater without damaging his minions. Gotta bite the bullet, though.
Trade. Yeah, there's just no real clean way to do it, is there?
Essentially just a re-dagger and pass from Surrender. It doesn't feel worth it to stab the 1-3. Yes, it protects his Foxy Fraud, but the whole game plan was for him to get this aggro damage, right? So he can close out with Wicked Stabs and Alex towards the late game. So he's holding on, but for GivePLZ, that is such a green light to just get greedy. Surrender's hand is gassed out.
Oh yeah, big time. The second stage dive is awkward here because you don't want to go conditioning to corrupt it. You know, it would literally just be better to play it first at that point to get more immediate stats on it. But it looks like he's just going with tempo run thack, which, you know, I say quite literally, like it's just buffing 1 minion here, which is really not very much at all.
Yeah, that's frankly a bit surprising to me, but he's just saying here that he values the minion on board more than he does the buffs into hand, which is still, you know, fair play. He has conditioning to buff whatever he draws off these stage dives and still manages to spend all his mana corrupting the second one. So I don't hate it. Oh man, this is so rough for Surrender. No passage, no Kazakas, no Mancrick's Wife, no field contact in the top 8 cards.
No Swindle, no Wand Thief. Like, there are so many good cards he could get here that at least do something. But Alex into Brain Freeze is decidedly not it. I absolutely agree, as it looks like he's just winding up for a Wicked Stab, regular stab, and then Redagger to try and just bide his time until he finds the field contact / the secret passage. But my goodness, is he going to have to find it soon? Double conditioning here. It could even just be a full setup turn here from GivePLZ with conditioning into conditioning and then swing the board next turn.
I do like getting 1 minion on board right now because it does seem like Surrender is doing a whole load of nothing, so he can sneak in a little bit of extra damage, right? Because he would potentially make this a 7-8, but it's dealing 5 damage right now a lot of the time, so I think it's worth it.
Ooh,
okay, a draw card, but it's so hard to activate. Probably just Brain Freeze, right? Into the Swindle.
Playing Prize Plunderer first does, like, immediately give you 3 damage, which is quite difficult to get off of the Prize Plunderer anyway. But then, of course, you are making a potential field contact that you draw that much worse. So, yeah, I definitely don't begrudge him just going for the Brain Freeze to start the turn, praying for a good minion, praying for Mancrick.
Oh, so expensive.
It's okay.
So he can kill this. I hate it, but he can. Wicked Stab, Prize Plunderer. Can he afford to take this 5 every turn, knowing that there's probably even more buff minions in hand?
I just think if he's going to have any chance, he needs to get field contact into activating the Prize Plunderer that way. It's just not good enough if he goes for it here.
Fair enough. But oh my goodness, Playmaker, Crab Rider, Playmaker unlikely to die next turn, so Rakara ×2 coming down and buffing whatever board sticks by that point. Ay. This is not something Kazakas can handle.
Yep, too much statage. Raw minion presence way too high here. Kazakus into 1-cost golem. Like, you could go Kazakus 1, look for poisonous plus deal 3, and then go for I guess the secret passage to hit Shadow Step.
Just gonna go for the guaranteed clear on what the most threatening minion in the Playmaker, and then the most fragile minion with his prize plunder. Going fishing for the other prize, you'd have to imagine, off of this passage, but hits not the cards he was looking for.
Okay.
This prize plunder, even stepping it, doesn't get big enough to deal with the bumper card, does it? Because he has to dagger the 6-1.
No, it does. If you go double Neophyte and step it, that's exactly enough, right? Gets you up to precisely 6 cards played, which I think is the only play he has available.
Oh yeah, you're right, you're right. 3 cards played before this, including the passage. Right, it's as good a clear as any.
Yeah. It is a very, very good turn. I mean, obviously the main concern is that GivePLZ is... Surrender is simply dying, even if he is able to wrestle back the board. But this is the kind of turn that had to happen. Now, maybe with Alex Straza at the top end, we could look potentially at him being able to survive. But first of all, he needs to clear the board on this turn.
Top deck Playmaker, that's so gross here.
Yeah.
Even just singular Akara was tough enough for Surrender to deal with, but now every minion getting bigger. Board cleared, lethal for this game and the next game at 30 health, threatened by GivePLZ.
I'm looking for mercenary.
Yeah, you can go 1-cost golem, bounce it back, 10 woo it to play it again. Even if you hit the perfect minions, still just dead. So I don't even know what you can look for here. Lifesteal?
Poison, then it hits the 9/11, and then rush copy on the next one to kill 1 Rakara. Nope, still just dead. Yeah, I don't see it.
Well, he has to bounce the actual golem itself, right? Otherwise he won't have mana to play it again. He can't even bounce Kazakus, so it has to be the same one played twice. Lifesteal plus deal 3 if it hits exactly the Playmaker, and the 7-1 Rakara still is not enough.
So many options.
Surrender racking his brains for any miracle golem he could possibly find, but there is just no combination from the 6 possibilities you can get for keywords, nor the 6 possibilities you can get for additional effects that pull him out of this mess. If he had 1 more mana, maybe we could talk about bouncing Kazakus to find 2 different golems, but this is just not one of those cases. Game 2 goes to GivePLZ in what is admittedly an expected outcome in terms of on-paper favorability of the matchup, but the pan-out was just so brutal for Surrender.
Yeah, really difficult to make anything happen whatsoever in that series. In that game for Surrender. In terms of the impact that this has, of course, it's a little more important for Surrender to take the win here because he is looking at that slim chance of getting enough wins to creep up to the playoffs zone, whereas GivePLZ does still have the opportunity to finish in second, I believe, if he manages to keep winning and winning and winning, which he has to do by starting with the win over over Surrender here. And with both warriors out of the way now, we can see that it's going to be Druid and Rogue left over for GivePLZ and Paladin and Rogue left over for Surrender. An interesting dynamic, of course, as I feel like you and I have slowly come around to the idea that Rogue is in a good spot versus Druid. The question is really just how does this Paladin stack up against the Druid? As the next match that we are going to see here, it's the secret Libram Paladin for Surrender. A potent deck still, despite the wave of nerfs that have hit Paladin as of late, but still a little clunky. It's slow to get rolling because you need to get the Librams reduced before it hits peak power. And the Token Druid can very often prioritize on those slow early turns.
I would compare this matchup similar to Token Druid versus Rush Warrior. in terms that both decks have this one trump card of Blademaster Samuro, right, that can sweep up the entire board. But I still think it's better for Libram Paladin than it is for Rush Warrior because it actually has quite stronger early game to develop just Aldor Attendant into Hand of Adal, that type of thing. More consistent card draw that allows it to get to this Blademaster Samuro. And most importantly is the Oh My Yogg potential to mess with Token Druid's key turns of Glowfly Swarm and then buffs for lethal.
That's right. Yeah, it's still the same game plan for the most part that you are looking for as the Token Druid. I think that the the early game plans that we mess around with Gibblings going for slightly smaller boards are a lot less potent against Druid. You do have to hit these big one-turn boards that are, or one-turn Uber boards that are essentially impossible for the Paladin to deal with, as we saw from Lambie series earlier on today. Druid into the Soul of the Forest on the same turn, Druid into Glowfly into Pride's Fury on the same turn. Very, very difficult for Paladin to answer. But already, for Surrender, an interesting looking starting hand. Oh My Yogg is a secret, so you basically never keep it. But your opponent is on the play, and you have Northwatch Commander. Would you ever consider holding on to Oh My Yogg?
Worth thinking about, but if we think about the average pan out with that hand, right, it's played turn 1, and then you want to coin out the 3-4, then they probably just throw a Guess the Weight into it, and then
True.
If you have Fungal after, you kind of feel like in a bad spot too. So I agree with Surrender going for something even more impactful, and he absolutely has hit that now. Aldor Attendant and the Sword of the Fallen and Hand of Odal and First Day of School. There's so many ways you can approach this, but I'm in favor of just the two strongest cards on curve first, which is the 1-3 and then the weapon.
I'm not necessarily convinced. The weapon. Sorry, I thought we were leading into Hand of Adal. Yes, the weapon, I think, on turn 2, definitely the way to go, just because it disrupts your opponent. If they're thinking of going for that turn 3 fungal, you can at least make it scarier for them to do so. And again, I think it feeds into what we've been constantly talking about with Paladin versus Druid. It's more important to develop minions, develop the weapon. As small as those minions may be, or as unimpactful as that sword may be, it's more important to do that than to buff your minions, because it's very unlikely that the Druid will ever deal with your minions, so you can buff them whenever you like.
It also just thins the deck a bit better, makes the average draw quality of his draws nicer. And we see GivePLZ just testing for Oh My Yogg with the Innervate, sees it's not there, and that means he's only afraid of Galloping Savior now, and even if the Galloping Savior procs, then his Gibberling is still behind 2 taunts. But I think he actually got Avenged then? Did Surrender?
I did not see, I apologize, on the secret that was pulled.
Yeah, that's 3 cards played, so has to be Avenged, which is the worst outcome. Oh my goodness, that's very unlucky.
Yeah, that is a disaster. I like the pick of Force of Nature as well. The other two were kind of tempting. Its card draw on the Nourish ramp on the Overgrowth is not worth nothing. But you're trying to prioritize this minion start with more minions afterwards with the Force of Nature. So let's just keep it up with maximum minion development.
So awkward for Surrender because he really wants to swing to get Oh My Yogg because he's so scared of something like Pride's Fury or even Arbor Up with the mana banked from the Nature Studies next turn. But swinging means into a 1-2 when there's so many 1-1s that weapon charge is actually quite relevant to get rid of next turn. I do think he's forced to swing though because these are very unlikely 1-1s if he doesn't get Oh My Yogg by the time the next turn rolls around for the Druid.
I agree, and it also means that you kind of free up the mana that you would be spending on Libram of Wisdom. You do not have to play that anymore. You could instead go Knight of Anointment plus Gnarg, Knight plus Safety Inspector, honestly, is also not a ridiculous option. Or even both.
It's true. I was thinking potentially Hand of Adal to kill a 1-2, but because he's swinging into a 1 of the taunts anyway, might as well leave the Attendant at a health total where it's still able to take down the taunt. And now, whoa, GivePLZ access to Pride's Fury, but doesn't know what the secret is. The second one at least. And this first one is Avenged, so that's yet another reason for Surrender to go wide on board, right? Gives him a lot of incentive to get some minion buffs.
Indeed. It was Galloping Savior, as I can see here, so GivePLZ could just get away with playing a Pride's Fury here, but it's so scary if it gets dealt with thanks to the Oh My Yogg.
from his perspective, it's just 2 and 3 that it's Omayog because
Yeah.
Omayog's the only one Surrender runs 2 copies of, so it's unimaginably unlucky for him to have hit the other 2 by this point. However, throwing a 4-cost spell into Omayog isn't always awful for you. There's some good outcomes in the pool. But as it turns out, GivePLZ tests, and Surrender's kinda happy about that because GivePLZ doesn't have much to do with the rest of his mana. It's like just Thorn Growth, but then Avenge goes off.
Right, you have to trade everything away to make room for it, which, again, he can do, but he has to make some pretty awkward trades, and he still ends up eliminating the Spell Burst effect on the Glowfly. So not the turn, I think, that GivePLZ was looking for, but of course, given that he was very, very much expecting the Omayog to come down, it's a surprise outcome for him indeed.
So funny how it was unlucky for Surrender, but because GivePLZ didn't have a good buff that he was willing to test with, it kind of worked out as a bluff. Surrender's still in an awful position though because the Librams are a bit expensive to play with Penflinger to clear up most of this board, and we see this Pride's Fury from GivePLZ primed and ready to come down next turn.
It's a weird turn for Surrender because obviously the initial play I'm looking at is just Penflinger played twice with 2 Libram of Wisdoms. But there's a good amount of value in going for card draw with Hand of Adal because you know, you need some stronger plays in the next couple of turns. A Libram of Justice to reduce the health of everything down is very important. Finding Aldor Truthseeker is very important as well, and that does lead Surrender into going for the line of drawing with Hand of Adal.
Yeah, I agree with this. He still gets the Penflinger to come down twice. I think it's pretty necessary to kill off 1 more minion here, and yes, you don't get to bounce it into hand, but Penflinger, the time when it's really useful has pretty much passed, right? As soon as the board is buffed, you're not able to kill a minion with just a Penflinger proc. And that's exactly what GivePLZ is going to go for. He knows this last secret is Galloping Savior now. Although he could take a Force of Nature turn if he likes.
Yeah, it's weird, right? This Pride's Fury is not actually that good on this turn. And so just going Luna plus Force of Nature.
Is he even Lunar here?
Well, that's fair. Yeah. I was going to say you do it preemptively and then don't trade into it and just leave it as a 6-2. But then maybe it's not worth playing it at all.
Glowfly effectively the same as Force of Nature here, but GivePLZ just expects to not have more spells in hand by next turn, so this is probably just an optimization. Surrender has been given 1 more window because the Pride's Fury was only buffing 4 minions. Gets to kill at least 2 with this board. Still looking for Ariel. Kills 1 more, but kind of slow.
It is kind of slow. It allows you to play Hand of Adal.
And the Librams.
And the Librams, of course, yeah. Like the reduction in spell effects is the big deal on this turn. Again, the awkward thing is you can't play the Libram of Hope next turn. It's still just that 1 mana too expensive, but it's undeniably still just the best play on this turn, without a doubt.
I mean, you can play it if the Carriel sticks, which is honestly not
true.
Most wild proposition. Of course, we can see this Lunar Eclipse that GivePLZ will be prioritizing to remove the Carriel with, but last turn, GivePLZ deemed 4 minions not good enough to play Pride's Fury into, so Surrender can once again leave him on 4 minions and say, if you Pride's Fury this, actually the minions only go up to 3-5, most of them, and one of them 2-4, which don't trade very nicely into a 6-5 Carriel, or even what's left of the Safety Inspector.
No, that's a very, very good point. And then the rest of the turn needs to be thought of as where do these Librams of Wisdom go, to which you could say Gnarg, because you want it the easiest minion to kill off so that you can replay them. But I like where his head's at in putting them on Carriel. Again, it plays into what you were saying. If Carriel survives and you get to go again with the swing next turn, Libram of Hope becomes playable. And that is where I think finally Surrender will have crossed over into safety and can start looking at actually winning this game.
GivePLZ does not have a solid answer. He can Lunar the Carriel, but he's not actually cheating much mana with the Lunar Eclipse because he's only able to fit in a hero power with that discount because you'd have to imagine it's a 4-cost spell coming down alongside this. And all of the 4-cost spells are pretty poor in this situation. But he has to kill Carriel. Oh, but then he regenerates Librams and Surrender's Hand. It's just so awkward no matter how you think about it. So Gonna go for the Soul of the Forest, trade down the majority of the board, and Surrender, even though he's not able to play Libram of Hope next turn, is feeling very safely in the driver's seat now.
That's exactly right. This is the problem with the modern iteration of Token Druid. Just because you stick a board, it does not mean that you win the game. Gone are the days of double Savage Roar, Arbor up as well, Solar Eclipse, all that goodness before we saw the rotation to the core set. It's far from a guaranteed win just because you are able to stick the board. GivePLZ, however, does, even though this is looking rough for him, manage to clear off the Carriel. So Surrender is left with an interim turn, one tough turn before he's able to start popping off with Libram into Lady Liadrin, all that goodness, and then it'll be impossible for GivePLZ to come back. So how does he bridge this gap?
I think it's relatively simple. Just kill off these 2 minions and one of the Librams of Wisdom goes on the Gennard, so it takes a value trade. Another probably goes on his hero power minion. And even though he floats some mana, well, he can just re-equip the sword, right? And it feels bad to not get the Oh My Yogg, but it feels worse to leave up an additional minion when he didn't need to. So even if there is a buff spell for GivePLZ here, at worst, Arbor up, I guess Solar Arbor in the very worst scenario, he still gets this 8/8 ton. This is just the last line he needs to cross, and I think he's absolutely done it.
Yeah, it needed to be Solar Arbor. With this particular hand, GivePLZ could have got Lightning Bloom that would have allowed him to go Force of Nature plus Pride's Fury that was, you know, arguably enough to keep him in the game if he got card draw to follow it up. But I think we can clearly see with Libram of Hope into Lady Liadrin, it's one too many big minions for GivePLZ to be able to answer.
And it's tough for him to hope that neither of those is there because Surrender has like spent a whole turn re-equipping a weapon and can kind of think if it's not exactly Alexstrasza, all of those heavy hitter cards are available now on this mana cost. So he's just going to go for Force of Nature on the full clear. And to be fair, going into exactly Libram of Hope going wide is his best response, but it's just not wide enough. Ooh. How greedy can he be here?
That is somewhat interesting. It does allow you to play Libram of Justice on the same turn. I don't know if that's necessarily good, because you are, of course, afraid of, you know, again, the Pride's Fury, the Solar Arbor, all the buff spells.
I think there's a strong argument for the Truth Seeker because he can get it up to 8 health here, which is effectively the stat line of the Libram of Hope, right? Because it's an 8/8 and you can't fit in the Librams of Wisdom without it. And attack matters only if you are thinking that the Treant's health can get above the 6 attack that will be on this Truth Seeker, which they can't even with just a Pride's Fury. So I think this is good for Surrender, and he gets to fit in the swing of the weapon, which will guaranteed get him Oh My Yogg as well.
Yeah, at long last, he will get the one good secret against Token Druid, which will be a big deal for him. Because, again, I do think as it comes down to it, I really like this line that you're laying out, because it means that even if they do have these big buffs, these combos of Solar Arbor, Solar Pride's Fury, it's difficult for them to actually get it online. A decent top deck, however, for GivePLZ just to proc the Oh My Yogg. I'm not entirely sure what could get him back into this game, but that is not it.
Nope. Even if he got like one of the positive ones, Raise Dead, it's just too slow.
Sure.
Maybe Flurry, and then he could take a turn to ignore this board and set up, but just not happening. Not hitting the good buff cards. Even if he goes Power of the Wild and Pride's Fury, that will get the Treants to 4 attack. I guess 2 of them could then trade into the Libram, but they both die, and that feels awful. He can clear the board, though, which is relevant because then Surrender technically cannot immediately buff a minion with the Librams.
I mean, no matter how you slice it, I think GivePLZ's cam just perfectly lays it out. These kind of situations as Token Druid, on ladder you would already have conceded, but in these tournament games where it's way too important to throw it down when you have a 0.5% out, whatever it may be, it's honestly like pulling teeth. It's pure torture having to sit through these games that you know you've basically lost.
To be fair, that's the worst draw in Surrender's deck because this last charge of the sword would have pulled it for him. But he's winning so hard, it completely doesn't matter. Go for Libram of Hope, Libram of Justice, naturally play the Omayog. And GivePLZ is just not going to bother. I think this concede is much more warranted than the one we saw yesterday.
Yeah, indeed, nothing that GivePLZ can do there, as he does just throw it down. Surrender taking the win with the Paladin. Big deal, because now the only deck left over to him, left for him to win with after he's won with the Warrior and the Paladin now is that Rogue, a deck that is in a premium spot, I believe, against the Druid. On average, you are just looking at being able to get far enough ahead on board and the Druid struggling to pull back. And then again, the Rogue Mirror. We could be looking at a Game 5 Rogue Mirror for the third time in a row today. Would be pretty hilarious. But first of all, GivePLZ, of course, needs to win with the Druid against the Rogue, which, based on the matchup, based on the way Surrender has been playing, I do think will be a very difficult feat to accomplish.
Definitely feels that way. Although Surrender did have one of the most unlucky Rogue draws I've seen in a long time in stream in the first game. That's super rare to see in Rogue because they have a lot of redundancy of how they hit the strong card draw, right? Whether it's just hitting the curve, which means you don't need to draw for a long time, or discounting even singular cards for the field contact turn, or hitting a singular secret passage. One of those things is often enough for Rogue to hit their powerful game plan, and it's very rare that you hit none of them like Surrender did in Game 1. So I think on average, Surrender should be in a very good spot. I agree. He's running the completely standard list as well. We saw him put Penslinger to very good use in the Libram Paladin a while ago, but none of that in the Rogue.
Yeah, just the standard stuff for Surrender here. I believe last week, as I was correcting the key cards, he was running a Broomstick in his Rogue, which again I think is one of the cards that can help you secure up that matchup against Druid even further. But the Guardian Orc Merchant is far from a bad card because a lot of the time it's one of the most difficult matchups for your opponent to deal with a field contact if it has Divine Shield. A lot of the time the Lunar Eclipse is earmarked almost purely for field contact just to deal with it in those early turns, whereas if it has Divine Shield and you have to sink mana on a hero power to do it as well as Druid, it's just not there. The mana is too tight to be working with there. So overall, the standard list I think is a very reasonable choice for Surrender and will leave him in a good spot against the Druid. A single game away from securing his spot through to the semi-finals. I don't believe he will be guaranteed through to the playoffs yet, but it gives him the chance of getting into that playoffs and the chance of getting another spot at the World Championship for Surrender.
Surrender starting on the coin. I think that's a pretty welcome sight, just if only to allow you to get Octobot down turn 1. But Surrender going to keep the classic combo of Foxy, Fraud, Swindle. GivePLZ's hand pre-mulligan was looking very dire, but now he's hit Fungal Fortune, so we could have a very interesting game on our hands, especially now that Surrender's also hit Cult Neophyte.
Take pride in your skill.
Take pride in your skill. What? If GivePLZ already tilted, the game hasn't even started.
He's literally done nothing. Was it because he kept cards in the mulligan? Is that what we're salty at now? Oh my goodness. Take a deep breath. Have a sip of water. You know, it's fun to get tilted. I am a big-time emoter. I am often ragged for it. But in these tournament games, you need the right headspace.
Care to make a wager, friend?
Take pride in your skill. That's a funny way to be tilted because it's essentially a compliment. But I'm sure as he sees this Neophyte come down on curve, you'd have to imagine we could have some more emotes for us, Derek. Octobot also tempted, but this is going into Fungal Fortune, so...
Oh, it's really tough because if you play... it's just the fact that you don't have any way to proc it yourself. Like if you play Octobot and they go Fungal Fortunes as the expected play, you're in a similarly rough position. At that point, you know, you're looking at going field contact just to deny their big Glowfly turn, the turn after. And so because of that, I do agree that this is the way to go with the Cult Neophyte.
Okay. Yeah, GivePLZ is upset, you can see that. But I was going to say, at least he drew Lunar Eclipse.
Yeah.
To prevent any chance of shadow stepping this Neophyte, but he says, not good enough. I want Gibberling or something to go with Lunar Eclipse. I don't know, though.
I mean...
When he got this step.
I fully believe that Luna was a snap play on that turn. I don't want to go into it too deep because I think GivePLZ may just disagree with the line, but this is where that tilt comes in. He feels resigned already, to be perfectly honest. He's just accepting, yeah, I'm getting unlucky. Yeah, it's all coming down to this. Because now he's getting punished. This Cult Neophyte being stepped here is disastrous.
And it can be stepped with a field contact and give Please the catch-22 of you can only Lunar Eclipse one of those, and that's the only thing you're doing next turn. But then Surrender could get greedy himself, step the Foxy to go with Swindle, but I don't know, I think the disruption is too premium here.
Yeah, I mean, you have to bear in mind that if they just go Fungal the turn after because you played Neophyte on that turn, it's not that good for you. But it does, of course, lock out Lunar Eclipse. They cannot go Lunar plus Fungal Fortunes on the same turn. And if they just go Fungal Fortunes and your field contact stays in play, I think you accept that you've just given them Fungal Fortunes on the following turn.
I would happily accept that if that means I get to stick field contact. Lunar dealing with it here, and Surrender now can go for Octobot with Swindle. He can also proc his own Octobot if he likes, but there's just no need, right? Because the expected play from GivePLZ is Glowfly Swarm, and then the Octobot can proc into that. And then you get a super cheap hand with field contact and Prize Plunder already there, and he can quite likely clear it all up.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's just, it's not necessary. If they don't develop a board and you can't play Jandis next turn, fine. You know, you're still winning by a very large margin then. And if they do play a board, you have the option of clear or, of course, just straight up Jandis for 5 mana if their board is not threatening enough.
The only huge fear here for Surrender is some super insane hand with Glowfly into an immediate, like, Arbor up if he had double Lightning Bloom and Survey, but that's such a niche combination of cards. And as we can see, it's only 6 Glowflies here. This is going to be a piece of cake for Surrender to deal with because the field contact and the Prize Plunder and now Vanessa also as a minimum way to keep the chain going are all going to be cheapened.
Sure does feel that way, doesn't it? Starting off with just bump with the Octobot. You know, again, there's argument for going for Secret Passage first, but I think this hand is just so powerful already. Like, honestly, Surrender is kind of close to just having lethal in the next couple of turns if he doesn't have to use these Wicked Stabs on minions.
Going to Vanessa first, so the Prize Plunder gets to 2. Which is relevant because he can draw Og Merchants, which you would rather use to deal the 1 damage on the 2-1, and there is that example right there. 1 Shadow Step used already and no board space for Tenwu, so it's not the cleanest of clears, but it's more than enough to get this game in the bag.
It's still pretty good, yeah. No Man-Crick played, so no need to worry about hand space issues. Surrender digging for, I would guess, more board clears, but most importantly, Shadow Step to replay this Cult Neophyte. Having found it there, he could get that down again, completely deny yet another turn from GivePLZ as well.
Is it the Neophyte or is it the Prize Plunder even to step and then just send everything face? I mean, he's just winning next turn.
Okay. Fair enough. I guess you don't even need to deny their turn if you are just winning. You know what? Have your mana. Good luck with it because there is nothing that GivePLZ can do, even if he has the full suite of mana available.
It's just very high awareness that even if GivePLZ had, say, double Lightning Bloom here with Arbor up, with only 2 minions on board, the most he can clear off Surrender's board is 6 damage, and then he's just dead. So GivePLZ throws it up in the air, another thumbs up, all the reactions you need for the Tilt starter pack.
Yeah, that was some mega tilt there from GivePLZ, and I can understand there was little he could have done in that game. The one decision he did have, though, I do strongly believe it was the incorrect one by not going for the Lunar Eclipse. I think it was purely mental at that point. He had already resigned himself to losing that series. You know, the emote on turn 1 before his opponent has literally done anything that game, I think just speaks volumes as to where his head was at. But it does mean that GivePLZ, despite being still guaranteed in the playoffs spot, has no chance of getting through to the top 2nd place. We will still be seeing him next week, and he still has that chance of going through to the World Championships.
Indeed, and Surrender himself has the ability to set his sights even higher, making it to playoffs in the first place. I don't have the exact numbers on it quite yet because we have focused more on the relegation stories, but it's nice that we can just completely shift the tone now towards more aspirational context because players are now gearing up for preparing for playoffs, getting into Worlds, which is the goal of pretty much every Grandmaster, and being ready for a new meta, because once again, next week, new mini set out, Wailing Caverns, 35 new cards ready to shake up the meta.
Yeah, that's going to be very, very exciting to see how our players adapt to that.